Hey, I'm Huyen Tue Dao. I am your randomly typing, friendly neighborhood Android developer co-host of Android Faithful, and this is where we talk to some of the designers, the developers, and other people behind the amazing, fun, delightful, useful experiences behind your day-to-day Android apps and experiences. I am super excited to have on this episode or this interview one of my very good friends, someone I used to work with, Lacey Kobriger. Lacey, welcome. How you doing? It's been way too long. I think it's been like a couple years since we worked together and since I've seen you, even something like that.
Since we've worked together, definitely.
Yeah, we have worked together. I'm not just saying that. And I think I'm incredibly excited to have Lacey just because. Well, we'll get to that in a second. But Lacey, for the audience, like, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do, and what's your mobile backstory?
Oh, okay. Abridged. I'll be as abridged as possible. So I've been in technology and specifically UX design for very close to 15 years, probably technically more 14. I was in game design originally, then moved over to non-video game products. Was in UX for 3 or 4 years, and then had an opportunity to work with some incredible developers that really challenged my view of design and how to do mobile design well. And that kind of kickstarted my love of native mobile, and I've been doing that for over 10 years now.
Yeah, so just for a little bit of background, I used to work at Atlassian, and Lacey, you still work at Atlassian, correct? And I think it's really interesting just to give a little context. So, I mean, when we say UX, we mean user experience. So Lacey is one of the great minds behind, for example, what you literally experience or what the flow is like when you access a feature, a screen, or just a number of those in the mobile app. I'm kind of like little, engineer paraphrasing, making it sound like as unsexy and clinical as possible. But what I really loved about working with Lacey is that unfortunately, as an Android dev, and I've been doing this for like 12, 13, I don't even know what the numbers are. Gingerbread was like the current release of Android when I started working. And historically, it's been really hard to get, as an Android dev, a designer rather, that not only designs with Android as a platform in mind, like in particular, and that's why when Lacey says she's a native mobile developer, that's super special to me. So it's really hard to find designers with even, a familiarity with Android, and even more than that, like actually designing and thinking about experiences from an Android user's point of view. And I have to admit, as a compliment, Lacey is one of the first and only designers that I have met that really kind of focused on that. And I love that you say native mobile, because that makes a difference. And when we say native mobile, we generally mean like someone like me who specializes in Android or someone who specializes in iOS. And so, Lacey, when you say that, I get all excited because I feel like, hey, you really care about what the Android design system and languages and experiences are like, right? At least that's what I hope when you say that.
Yes. Very much so. And I mean, even from the design side, I feel like my experience has been very similar to yours, where I often feel like an outlier rolling up into a room and being like, I'm a native mobile designer. And people are like, why? Like, why does that matter? Why do you care? Like, isn't all UX the same? And I feel like it's been a journey to both stick to my guns on it's not the same, and having advocates like you really help tell that story from both sides of the equation.
So was it that experience you mentioned earlier, or was it something else that kind of solidified in your mind, hey, like, or even, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit sassy about it. And is it common sense where, that you want to, where you kind of got this desire to design for a platform and for the experiences of that platform? What kind of like sparked your interest and drive to do that?
Yeah, I will. I love telling this story. I will try to not spend too long waxing poetic about it, but
Oh no, go ahead. I like it.
Okay.
Poetic waxing. I
We'll
like
wax
it.
poetic.
Excellent.
So I had worked on native mobile products before this particular point, but it was always, as I think most designers approach it, of like, I know how to ask users questions. I know how to think about things in flows or information architecture. Uh, but I didn't know anything about native mobile technology. And right around the time that material design was coming out, so this was becoming like a thing that we could actually hold ourselves accountable to. Before then, it was a little bit more Wild Westy. iOS 7
Mm-hmm.
had been out for I guess to user or market release for 6 months to a year, let's
Mm-hmm.
say. So this is still pretty new, pretty fresh, pretty like it's actually different. I was pulled onto a project. I was working at a consultancy at the time where it was a startup. They wanted to make a new app. I asked all the usual questions to the stakeholders, did some sketching. At the time, we were using OmniGraffle. I don't know if anyone even knows what
Oh my God, I
OmniGraffle is
love
anymore.
OmniGraffle. No, no, yeah, I had the whole suite. That's awesome. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
OmniGraffle.
It was a very specific way of designing. And I remember going through and like making like literally the deck was easily 100 pages of just like, 1 to 3 screens per giant, like 11 by 18 sheet of paper with like long form annotations on the side. Spent like a week or two like making all these designs. I was so excited to just sit next to the printer, waiting for them to come off all nice and hot and organize them all neat. I walked across the building into this war room that was full of native mobile designers, iOS and Android. And I sat my little pack of wireframes down and we started going through them. And the room was kind of quiet, but we just kept going. And at one point, I believe it was an Android engineer that was like, I'm going to stop you right there. These are great designs. They're super well thought out. Clearly, you've spent time with this, but these aren't mobile designs. This is a website on a phone screen. And I feel like when most designers are told that, they're a little like pearl clutchy, a little like, well, you don't know anything about design. And I was just like, I was a little bit like that. I'm not going to lie. Being like 4 or 5 years into your career, being told that is going to
Mm-hmm.
rattle you a little bit. But I'm
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? Let's go deeper on
I
that.
had the same reaction. I don't know when you said that. I also in sympathy, in empathy, sympathy also kind of leaned back and went like this. And so I mean, and I think definitely that's been a challenge. Is that hopefully trying to be an empathetic person, understanding that I'm challenging you and that you have expertise that I know I don't have as an engineer. And so it can be difficult to have that interchange. So what happened after that? After the pearl clutching,
Yes.
ceased a little.
Yes. So, like I said, material design was brand new. And it was really difficult for me at the time to understand what it was pitching because I don't know if you really remember the moment that material design came out. It wasn't super well articulated, in my opinion, where it wasn't like, how is this just not good design? It wasn't clear that it was a design system.
Mm-hmm.
That was also kind of a new idea still at that time, that there'd be like a system of like
Mm-hmm.
movable components and like this stuff matters. So going through that meeting and walking away from it pretty much instantly changed my behavior. And I went much less from what I call validation design, where I go off, I make a bunch of decisions, I do a lot of work, and then I come back with my decisions and I present them to you. And I hope that you have the context and the mental space to like get up to speed with what I'm talking about and like have enough context to have an opinion, which
Mm-hmm.
spoilers, most people don't.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
moved to a much more collaborative way of working where most of the time we were sitting in that war room and it was a glass top table and I had a marker and we were sketching out things and trying to figure out, okay, what works here? Can we use standard components?
Mm-hmm.
Now that I know what that word is, I still didn't understand at this point, but I was like willing to work through some of this stuff. And I felt like now looking back on that, that was so critical. And if I didn't have that experience, I probably wouldn't be focusing on mobile like I am today. And even like short term after that project, I left that experience being like, I had to learn some hard lessons. I feel really lucky I was in a position where the developers felt comfortable coming to me and saying, like, you tried, but this is bad. They were much nicer about it. But, that was a sentiment. And I wanted to help other designers not have to go through that hard lesson or hope that people had that psychological safety to make that comment and really
Yeah,
help people like skip the hard stuff. Obviously, there's no shortcuts to native mobile design. You need experience,
yeah.
you need to know your tools. There's so much to keep in your brain, especially if you're designing for iOS and Android with the platforms in mind. You're never going to be able to do it by yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
the more experience you get, the easier it is for you to have some of those conversations and know where those sticking points are going to be. So I really wanted to help other designers get to that point without the you
Yeah.
suck.
I, I also want to emphasize how, unfortunately, in my experience, and Lacey, please, interrupt me if, you agree or disagree, but that, in my experience as a mobile dev across many projects, you as the design folks and us as the engineering folks tend to be very separated. Like we might not even meet depending on the team or the company structure. And a lot of times, and I'm not saying this is right, but a lot of times I think we feel not necessarily it's you and us or y'all and then us, but that a lot of times we kind of get design. I've always said design comps. Do you know what comps is short for? What's comps short for? Is it compositions or
Probably. Yeah,
probably?
that's a good guess.
Words we use, but we're not really sure where they came from. So,
Nope.
so we get designs, specs coming down from somewhere, usually a manager, and said, "Here's what the designer did," and not every team, but there were a lot of teams where that was kind of it for the communication. It's I wouldn't even say that's one way because it wouldn't be the designer talking to us. It'd be like someone as an intermediary, and then that's kind of where the discussion ends. And there's no, input from engineers, but there's no also feedback loop with the designers. And so I think it's really special that so the collaboration that you described is so special. And I think that you telling me that story really is kind of connecting some dots with me because you are so you and I this is now me speaking of personal experience. We're very collaborative, very communicative, and I think it does take extra work to do this. And not saying that it's anyone's fault when the only chance they have is just to design something, throw it over the wall, and hope that in the wash it comes out as we all hope it does. So I just want to emphasize how special and rare that is, and also recognize that it took you kind of like some personal growth moments, maybe some understanding and empathy on the part of the engineer, and then further discussion. And it sounds like you, I mean, from what my experience with working with you, you try very hard to understand what to each platform, which is like a double job in and of itself, right? I only have to worry about Android in my day-to-day job, and that's hard enough. You, as a designer, have to think very comprehensively about what both platforms do, how they function, what like conventions are, and what do users in those platforms want. How do you keep up? Because I know on our show we talk about Android news all the time, and I barely keep up. How do you, as a designer and someone who's designing experiences natively, how do you do that? What do you do? What
Right.
do you do?
Right. I mean, this sounds really like a cop out, but working with developers is absolutely critical to this. And in our experience working together and in other experiences in different teams, this isn't always this way. But if you're lucky enough to be a designer actually sitting with a development team and you're not siloed, there's usually a lot of other people in the room. It's not just like me and Wen trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it is on a project, but
Yeah.
we aren't afraid to be like, hey, person Q, hey, person W, like, come on over. Like, we really want to figure this out. And I feel like that's another reason why it's been appealing to stay so focused on mobile for as long as I have, because the community is so consistently that way. I've found on iOS and Android engineers, like they really just want to help. They have a lot of knowledge. They give a lot of shits. They want to like support you in your journey. And I always feel really comfortable being like, yo, dog, I don't know how this works anymore. Like
Yeah.
iOS is calling table views lists. What the hell? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
explain to me like I'm five. And I feel like reaching a level in mobile where you have a certain level of skill, most of that skill is knowing what you don't know. Just like,
Hundred
wow.
100%. What do I need to Google, basically?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also an experience both for iOS and Android. So I love that you, as a designer, have picked up on that and are like thriving off of that and utilizing that energy. What do you think are the main challenges when you're thinking of a new experience? Like, I don't know, what do you think is where do the two platforms really start to diverge? Is it in the nitty-gritty details, or is there something that you think of particularly when you think of iOS versus an Android user?
This is
And
a
not
really
about
interesting
blue or green
question.
bubbles, not blue or green
Right.
bubbles.
No, no. I've had some really interesting discussions with people over the years where they've made comments, especially relatively recently, and recently meaning within like the past 3 to 5 years, iOS and Android on Surface seem to be kind of converging.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
to a certain extent, aspects of that are true, but then there's very core aspects of that that aren't true. Like if you think about navigation flows, if you think about expectations, if you think
Mm,
about the little differences,
yeah.
like even standard components on Android that don't exist on iOS, and you can kind of maybe make your own version, but then there's not that like expectation that users have. Like, favorite example, I was just digging into this recently, so it's top of mind chips.
Yeah,
Chips are
okay.
starting to show up on iOS apps, but they're not standard components. So
Mhm.
when you see chips, even on apps that Apple makes, so like
Mhm.
Apple Music or Fitness or whatever, they're not consistent. So you don't know how they're going to behave.
Oh, sorry,
Sometimes
just
they're filters.
my bad.
Oh, go ahead.
Just to clarify, chips are like the kind of pill-shaped buttons that you'd see
Yes,
like when you
yes,
have
yes.
like multi options on a filter. Like say you go order a food and you want to select, oh, open now or how expensive is it? And there's a little kind of pill. Are they pill-shaped on iOS? My bad.
So that's the thing. They
Okay.
aren't components, so they can be whatever shape you want them to be. Sometimes they're squircles, sometimes they're pills, sometimes they're neither, sometimes they're outlines. And I think that is a good example because on Android, chips
Mm-hmm.
are a standard system component, or at least
Yes.
it's has rules and expectations
Yeah.
around it. There's 4 different primary use cases. They look and behave this way. Here are the
Mm-hmm.
bounds of them. Not saying everyone uses them that way, but
No.
there's a strong suggestion. So if you, as a product team, kind of regardless of your title, are sitting down and you're trying to solve a problem, and on Android, chips make sense, and on iOS, it could, but there's not that expectation. Now you have to solve 2 problems, which is, do we use chips or not for iOS, or do we explore other patterns, which could significantly change the experience depending on the situation? Or do we introduce chips and now we have to figure out within our app and our ecosystem what are the behavior of the chips? How do they behave in dark mode? How do we set consistent expectations? Is there only one use case? Is it a filter? Or are there multiple use cases like on Android? So it quickly just kind of spirals out into like this big thing, which, spoiler, I know a lot of designers don't think about things that way. And when they're solving some of these problems, I know it's easy for them to say, well, I did it this way on iOS, Android, usually iOS, unfortunately. Just throw it over there, it'll be the same solution. And I feel like that is such a disservice to the tools and expectations that we get from Android and our users. And I feel like when I'm solving a lot of these problems, I try to start from the abstract. So
Mm-hmm.
making object maps, which are basically like writing down all the elements and the behaviors that you need on the screen and kind of like force ranking them on how they might appear on the screen, but there's no UI associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
can use that map to start to think more concretely about how I might solve that problem with standard components first for each platform
Mm-hmm.
and figure out where I need to diverge. Like, do I need to handle navigation differently? Do I not have an out of the box solution for this one thing? So, do I need to make some trade offs? Do I need to make some decisions? And I'm basically doing the same thing twice,
Yeah.
but I usually start from some common understanding of the problem we're trying to solve, what success looks like, and what the general architecture of the thing that we're trying to make is.
I think Lacey, you were one of the people when I left Atlassian, I was like, Lacey, I'm so sad I didn't get to work with you more. And I remember distinctly one of the things that I loved is that you were probably one of the only designers. There was another one, his name is Levin, that actually cared about large screens. And we in the last 2, 3 several years have talked about large screens a lot because at least on the Google side, and I know like to give iOS a lot of credit, they made the iPad work. And so I think iOS developers have had a lot more experience with like tablet experiences than we have. And I know that even like it's been I think I left Atlassian in 2022. So it's not too long ago, but it was still a challenge to get Android devs like me and especially like, managers, product managers caring about large screens. And that's one thing I loved about Lacey is that you actually really cared. And what was it about large screens that attracted you? And what goes through your mind when you see foldables and flippables and wearables and stuff like that? How do you take some excitement, or if you want to be a little more critical of it, hype on different form factors and different products? And how do you ingest that and say, hey, this could be worthwhile for us to spend time on?
Yeah. Large screens on Android is maybe more
It's
controversial. It really
it's a
shouldn't be that
lot.
controversial. But
No.
boy, I remember being in workshops with people where it's like, well, we should make large screens better. And iOS was like, yeah. And Android was like, boo. So it's,
Yes. To be fair,
um,
yes.
yeah. So, I mean, to a certain extent, we have tools in our tool belt to make a lot of this stuff work. And there are definitely, it's kind of like dark mode in a way. If you remember when dark mode first came out and people were like, do we support it? Do we not? It's just a fad. Like, who cares
Hmm.
about dark mode? It's extra work. Now I feel like you just kind of have to support it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not
Yeah.
an optional thing. Or like, this is also kind of a controversial thing because a lot of apps don't support it. Landscape rotation for accessibility and
Girl.
just general use.
Preach, my girl.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway, sorry,
yeah,
please continue.
yeah. So I feel like large screens kind of fits within that space for me where
Yeah.
I understand both sides of it, where if you aren't doing a lot with large screens now and you don't have that framework, it's really difficult to get that momentum and say, like, we're going to spend the next 3 to 6 months building out that large screen. Like, oof, that can be a really tough sell. But our devices are getting larger. People are more willing to use foldables. People are more willing to use tablets. The line between, like, is it a tablet or can I like use a tablet for my computer is starting to get a little bit blurrier. And I'm under no illusions that in the next year we are going to like throw away our laptops and just use tablets. But
Mm-hmm.
I see a future where that could be more realistic, and we should make some smart investments so we aren't stuck holding the bag when it's a thing we have to do. Um, I don't know. A lot of it is difficult. It's a different problem space. You do have to solve new problems, but if you get that core architecture set for your app to handle that large screen, it's really not that big of a deal. I don't know. Maybe I'm spoiled because Trello is easy, but you know, it's cards on a thing with navigation.
But no, but even that, like, I even think, even, I mean, just from the things that we've talked about and supported or kind of reported on the show, there's a lot of things that you would think would be just straightforward wins on a tablet, like productive, like Trello, obviously productivity stuff, media, like even messaging and emails. And there's so many like good opportunities there. And it's like people aren't taking them. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could talk to you forever, Lacey. I did want to go back because on the show, I know we have a lot of gamers, and I was just kind of curious to go back to your game experience. Is there anything that, I mean, I've kind of, my early tech life, I feel like someone just said this today and I can't remember who. Like a lot of my early tech life was inspired by gaming. And I know, and when you said, oh, I used to work in games, part of me just like, ooh, do you bring any of that with you? So yeah, is there anything from like maybe games experiences which are more immersive and more kind of have a different language maybe, and maybe not. Is there anything that you take from that experience into your day-to-day life, like now as a designer?
Two things.
Okay.
First thing, for a game to be really effective, you shouldn't have to explain how it works.
Oh,
And I take that into apps with me too. Like if I'm seeing coach marks and tutorials on how to use your app, no, fail, hard pass. Teach me through the product as much as you can. Second thing is this was a very strong precursor to my focus on collaboration.
mm-hmm.
I had many experiences between working in games and then moving into digital products where I forgot a lot about collaboration and I was like, oh, I'm a designer. I should just be independent, rah, rah. But hitting that moment, especially with that mobile experience, working more
Yeah.
with developers and having a lot of failure with that validation model of me, like coming up with the solution, being like, is this good? Can you tell me if it's bad? And then, of course, no one ever tells you it's bad or like critiques you in a real way. And
Mm-hmm.
then you ship something terrible. Or mostly what happened is I would design something and that isn't what shipped.
Mm-hmm.
Those experiences from game design like made a full life cycle loop of just like, oh, that's why we did this in game
Yeah.
design. This is why we were more agile. This is
Yeah.
why we were like bringing everyone into the conversation early, from like producers to concept artists to developers, because you all need to rally around the problem. And I know that the divide between design and development can be very sticky in some
Yeah.
areas of game design. There can be a lot of not collaboration happening, but I felt very fortunate to have a lot of working on really small, scrappy teams where you're wearing a bunch of hats. And that really set me up for success with knowing that even if I have a certain role or title, everyone can bring something to the process at every stage. So just because we're in design doesn't mean that developers don't have deep, rich, valid experiences to bring to help us solve those tough problems.
Lacey, thank you so much. I only wish that I could work with developers or sorry, designers that think and act and participate and kind of collaborate as much as you do. I think all of our apps would be in a better space. I know that you recently have also been doing a lot of really good work with outreach and giving talks and all kinds of stuff. I wish we could have even kind of like peeled a little bit back into like collaboration tools and things. Because I know you used to use OmniGraffle, but I know you recently gave talks on like kind of like modern tools that designers and developers can do for collaboration flow. Anyway, if people want to see all that and continue to see and hear the awesome things you have to say and do, where can they find you on the internet?
Technically, I exist on Twitter, but honestly, reaching out via email or LinkedIn, my website, designbetterapps.com, has all my contact information if you want to reach out. I'd love to hear from you and chat more.
Thank you so much, Lacey. This has been a total pleasure.
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy to see you. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. And that's it for now. See ya.